Let's talk some Seahawks football. It's time for our Ground Puck Podcast with Curtis Crabtree of Fox 13, Tim Booth of the Seattle Times, all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years, makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie's Off, a host of your other favorite beers. Tap room open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Tim Booth, Seattle Times, Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13. All right, boys. Well, first place, that was no doubt, guys, just get some opening thoughts, the most complete win that football team has had this year. Tim, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It was as solid a victory. Maybe the only other time you could maybe compare it this year was the win in Atlanta back in October. But to see what we did from the offense yesterday, specifically the running game, and to finally get that going, to protect Geno in the way that the offensive line did, for Geno to play a really smart game. It was clear that Arizona wasn't going to let them, get anything really over the top in the pass game, and for him to take those underneath throws and continue to get them into good down and distance situations throughout the game. I thought he played a really smart game. And then defensively, take away that first drive, and maybe the drive at the end where they started to rack up a few yards. For the middle 40 minutes of that game, they were really damn good, and it was just a continuation of what we've seen for the last 3-4 weeks. So really, really solid victory, really impressive victory. I still don't think Arizona is that good, but to go down there and get a win and kind of stake your claim to first place in the division and give yourself a little bit of wiggle room now. Going into these next two games, it was an extremely important and extremely impressive victory.
Curtis?
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of that Atlanta game, you saw a 20-yard run yesterday for the first time by anyone since that Atlanta game. That's how long they'd gone since having a 20-yard run of any kind when Ken Walker had his 20-yard touchdown in that game. And it just speaks to how much better the running game performance was in that victory yesterday in Arizona, to be able to have them balance out their offense some, showed how much better things can look overall, because the passing game didn't need to do everything for them to try to win a football game, to where everything could kind of click into place. And yeah, most complete all-around game that they played all season. You saw even like Tariq Young's tackle on special teams, clean on the kicks that they've had. Even on that front of things, it was solid performance. So definitely their best game that they played, I think, collectively all year for sure.
Yeah, special teams good. Yeah, that young play was great. The new returner, although it almost looked like he fumbled there when he hit the ground, like I think everyone's heart stopped. Myers continues to be rock solid, and I think for Michael Dixon, who's obviously banged up there with those back spasms, was great. That last punt where they pinned him deep was just phenomenal. Guys, we talk about this every week. Right? Last week, the conversation was what? Got to fire Ryan Grubb. Ryan Grubb's awful. He needs to be replaced at the end of the season. They don't have an identity, and he maybe it's too much for him, this NFL game. And I think we were all, in agreement. Listen, you can't get to plays if you can't block, if you can't truly run block or pass block. Yesterday, it's a cliche. You talk about it all the time. You win the trenches. You usually win the game. I know it's not sexy to say every time whoever has got the best interior lines is going to win it, Curtis. But that was the case yesterday. Defensively up front, they were awesome. And then offensively, that offensive line dominated Arizona.
Yeah, and I wonder if take the 51-yard touchdown run by Zach Charbonnet, for instance. You had both Satawa Lamea and Abe Lucas pulling from the right side of the offensive line to come through there. And I wonder if that kind of a play, in which they ran a bunch yesterday, those kind of pulling action plays, I wonder if that's why Lamea is in the lineup right now over Christian Haynes, and even going, I know he's injured, but even over Anthony Bradford. That'll be a discussion when he gets healthy, is maybe his athleticism and ability to get out and move might be the thing that they like about his game to give him that run right now. And I mean, bottom line, it's the best offensive line performance they've had all year, so they shouldn't change that moving forward anytime soon. So that certainly helped for them to be able to put up their best rushing performance of the season. Geno was only hit twice, not sacked at all. by far their best offensive line performance in quite a while, just overall, period. So, and when that happens, suddenly things look a whole lot easier to kind of handle everything up front. So, it's a big step forward for them for sure if they can replicate it. Now, if they can replicate that moving forward or get close to that, the ceiling for what this team is capable of the rest of the year has taken a pretty sizable leap forward. We need more than one game sample size to kind of bank on that, but at least gives you that, sliver of hope that they are moving in a direction where the offensive line can become at least not an absolute liability for them over the last month of the regular season, and at that point probably into the playoffs.
Tim?
Curtis brought up a good point there. I hadn't thought about Laumea's athleticism as the reason why they went to him rather than Christian Haynes. But it's a really excellent point, especially when you see what they did yesterday. They ran a lot of counters. They ran a lot of polling plays where Abe Lucas and Laumea are out front kind of leading the way. And that athleticism very well could be the difference. And look at the success that they had yesterday on the ground when they ran those plays specifically. Again, I don't, when they beat Atlanta earlier this year and the offensive line looked kind of good, the thing that stood out to me was Atlanta is not an elite defensive line. It's not an extremely good defensive front. Arizona's defensive front, I wouldn't put them up there as being an above average defensive front. So, while it looked really good yesterday, I think there has to be that context put into it of they weren't playing the Jets defensive front. They weren't playing the Niners defensive front when they were healthy. We need to see this kind of performance against a really good defensive line, against a good front seven. And they're going to get their opportunities in the next 2 weeks, especially because I don't necessarily think you put Green Bay and Minnesota in the category of being elite in the front seven, but they're pretty damn good. And it's the reason why Green Bay's got 9 wins and Minnesota has 11 wins right now, are part of the reason. So, but Laumea has brought something a little different to that front. And, to his credit, I mean, it's looked competent. It's looked like it can do stuff rather than us sitting here going, how the hell are they going to be able to do anything with what the offense is? And back to your original point, Puck, it all of a sudden opens things up for Ryan Grubb in a way that he hasn't been able to maybe call things this year when you have a competent group up front that's able to protect and open some holes. And I think we saw that in the first half yesterday. I think we saw a little bit of what this could be if you get that kind of protection and blocking up front moving forward with what Grubb wants to do in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of was the point last week. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that he hasn't been without fault, Ryan Grubb. I mean, he's made some mistakes here, but again, for all 22 people, okay, you can only get to as many plays and be as creative as you want offensively if you have people up front that can block. And yesterday, because of their offense and how they looked, they were able to block and they were able to run things against Arizona. And they just looked effective. To your point, I mean, even Gannon talked about it afterwards. They did some stuff in the running game. Tim, what you talked about, pulling guys, that action with their offense line that they just hadn't seen before. So nice adjustment by them to get 2 athletic guys that are on that offensive line moving and having some different looks. I thought Geno played it's not the most yards he's ever thrown for. What he complete? Damn near 80% of his passes, something like that. But he was efficient. It was very Brady-esque. A lot of dump downs. Let's get it to Charbonnet. Let's get it out quick. Throw it short. And on first down, that was the key yesterday. Nothing was 3rd and long, it felt like. They were 3rd and manageable against Arizona. And I love checking it down to the running backs, Curtis. I just thought they did it several times, and a little dump down to Charbonnet, which, he catches it about 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, gets a couple more, and all of a sudden now, Curtis, you're looking at 2nd down and 4.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, if Geno was to try to have forced something there like he had in a couple of the more recent games and you all of a sudden have that turnover, maybe the game looks a little bit different at the end. But they didn't need to because they were, playing from the lead. playing with their offense, able to do the things they were trying to do in general, and getting support from the defense to where you're not forcing the issue. And because they had struggled so much there for a while, the offense was needing to try to force the issue a little bit to keep the ball moving. Heading into this game, what was the stat that from Football Outsiders since week 7 they had been the worst offense in the NFL? They were feeling it. Like they understand that they hadn't been playing great, and they needed to do a little bit more. And that's why I think you started to see some of those interceptions crop up from Geno Smith trying to force that one extra play that he's trying to get there, and it having go sideways on him. And then to go back to the coordinator aspect of it, well, what was it, Mike Tyson quote? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And like you can have a plan for an offense, but if you're getting destroyed at the line of scrimmage, or just getting dominated by a defense overall, that plan goes out the window pretty quick, because you need to try to figure out something else to do because it didn't work. So it's a whole lot easier to coordinate offense and call plays when you're getting blocking up front.
Yeah. And Charbonnet was just excellent yesterday, Tim. I mean, here's a guy that got a lot of opportunities, obviously, with Ken Walker, with Walker being entrenched as the number one back. I think, though, in this town, maybe fans and some of the fans especially, you forget what a special talent this guy is and was at UCLA.
Yeah, and think about what we've talked about before with Ken Walker and how often he has to be the one to make the first guy miss because the blocking up front has been so terrible. So when you get a situation like yesterday where a downhill running back, a guy who's not the shifty guy that's going to, make a whole bunch of cuts and make, try and make everybody miss, but as a downhill runner and you get that kind of blocking, you get those results.
Yeah.
You get what you saw yesterday. You get him running behind his pads, you get him running over guys, 3-4 yards downfield, and you get those, big chunk plays separate from the 51-yard touchdown run, that really, really show what kind of talent, this guy can be. And his pass catching yesterday was, to your point, Puck, was exceptional. Like, he made a couple of really, really tough catches that set them up, that either got them first downs or set them up in short yardage situations. I want to say it was maybe the second drive of the game where he kind of caught Geno threw kind of high, and he went up and got one up above his head. And I don't remember if he got the first down off of it or if he just set him up in maybe third and short. But a couple of those plays yesterday really showed off maybe a range about him that, he's been the third down guy, but they haven't really used him in third downs, that much as a pass catcher. And yesterday in those early down situations, he came up with some really, really impressive catches for them and was a real threat in multiple ways.
It's something I'd like to see more of. I'd love to see them incorporate the running backs more.
Well, that was the whole idea when they drafted him, was like, hey, this 1-2 punch of Walker and Charbonnet. And I think it's kind of, I think it's gone back a little bit to that fact that they've been so bad at blocking in the run game. You kind of need the guy in there who can make somebody miss and who can actually make a positive play out of a potential 3 or 4 yard loss. Again, this is what we've been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks. When you get what you got yesterday, then you really can have that 1-2 punch of those two guys, working in tandem, moving forward and potentially creating a very dynamic pairing in that backfield.
Curtis, do we have a running back controversy?
No, I don't think we do. But it's good to have Charbonnet as a part of the mix, being able to do some stuff too. And as Tim mentioned there, Charbonnet had a catch really late in the game where it was a high thrown ball where you've seen it 1,000 times in the NFL, where that throw can't be handled by the receiver, running back, whatever, tips up in the air, gets picked off, and now all of a sudden it's going the other way. And he was able to snag that and keep the ball moving downfield. It was a dangerous, not a dangerous throw, but it got to a little bit of a tricky spot. And you've seen that, like I said, you've seen those turn into interceptions many times, and he was able to make that catch and keep them moving and allow them to close out that game. So, 193 yards from scrimmage yesterday for Zach Charbonnet. Massive game for them when they absolutely needed one.
And they needed it, right, guys? I mean, that game was needed not only because of the playoff chances and the odds, right? The win or lose. I mean, those numbers swayed dramatically had they won, which they did, and then had they lost. But I think two guys in particular needed it, and they were, one of them was awarded a game ball yesterday. But I do think, just going back to the topic of last week and now this week, I think Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff needed that game. Because the pressure was mounting, and it felt like everybody. I mean, that was all last week. Was just like, oh my God, it's so bad. And we don't really talk about Huff that much because he's offensive line coach. I don't think you talk about the offensive line coach all that much, anyways. But the pressure and just the heat was turning up on both those guys, and they were just phenomenal yesterday. I mean, I understand the opponent, but they still were good.
Well, and I think to that point, Puck, these are guys that we've never seen do it at the NFL level.
Yep.
So you've only seen them do it at the college level, and they've been really, really successful at the college level. So you don't have that history to fall back on to know that they're going to come out of whatever struggles they might have when it comes to the context of coaching in the NFL. And so you need to see this kind of result because it just reinforces Macdonald's belief in him, the franchise's belief in them, that they were the right coaches to bring in and the right offensive system to run with this group. Now, one game is great. Now you need to see it a couple more times, and to have it pointed in the right direction. Whatever the rest of the season ends up looking like, you want to see this offense pointed in the right direction as you go into the final 3-4 weeks of the season, and then whatever happens, whether that's a playoff berth and a playoff game, or something happens and you lose in week 18 and your season ends. You still want to see it trending in the right direction to know that, hey, these guys know what they're doing. They've learned during the season. They've made the adjustments on the fly, and this offense has this kind of potential in the future, because all you have to fall back on with them is, well, they look great at UW or they looked great at Fresno State, but how does it look in the NFL?
Well, let me just, Curtis, why, and Tim, you can answer this afterwards. Why do we, when it comes to players, and even I think, Mike, let's just say a new head coach, why do we afford rookie players a year to get their feet wet, but we don't afford that same grace to a first-year offensive coordinator who's a rookie? We just don't. He never called plays in the NFL. But we afford, if he were a rookie quarterback, we'd be like, oh, well, the game is changing, and he's got to learn how to adjust, and it takes these players a while to adjust to the professional level. But we don't afford it, I think, to the offensive coordinator. And then I go back to, earlier in the season. I mean, the first half of the year, first 6, 7, 8 games of the year, I mean, the defense was nothing to write home about. It's why they made all the moves that they did. The defense they weren't playing well at all. They were benefited, early in the season from a rookie quarterback making his very first start. They get the Dolphins without Tua. You see the difference in the Dolphins offense with Tua opposed to, I can't remember who started that game.
Skylar Thompson.
Thank you. But yet we were able to, all right, well, let's, pause, and now they've turned it around. And maybe this is the last game to kind of spark this offense. But, I mean, I don't know. Curtis, we should afford a guy who's a rookie as a play caller, I think, a little bit more grace and time to adjust to the league.
Nah, let's just be irrational.
That works as well. That works.
No,
because let me jump in, because I thought Jay Harbaugh, and then I'll shut up and I'll let you answer. I thought Jay Harbaugh said something interesting this week with you guys when he was talking about making all the moves and cutting the two specialists that they cut, and he said, well, I never had to go through that. This is the first time I've ever had to go through that. I've never cut a player in my life. In college, they were just, you're not cutting a college player. You bench them. But I had to cut, we had to cut somebody. And that kind of hit home, Tim, to your point, Curtis, to the point you've talked about as well. These guys are doing it for the first time. There's going to be a learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, I know we said it back in training camp that at some point there was going to be some growing pains for all of these coaches throughout the year, because all the top 4 coaches on this team are doing it for the first time at this level. Whether it's Macdonald, Durday, Grubb, Harbaugh, you could even go down to Huff for that aspect too. It's their first time coaching at the NFL level, and it's different. It just is. Like, you're not seeing Leonard Williams or Aaron Donald type players on the opposite left side of the line of scrimmage in college, except for maybe one in the SEC, maybe. Like, it's different what you have to handle. So there's going to be some adjustments that needed to be made. We've seen the defense do it, both from a personnel and, play standpoint. This Ernest Jones trade, man, like, good heavens, how good has that been for them? And, Roy Robertson Harris has helped them too, very much so as a run defender on the line of scrimmage. So they've made their fix to the defensive side. Kobe Bryant's not leaving the starting lineup now that he's been in there. So they've made numerous changes on that side. Trey Brown's not playing anymore in favor of Josh Jobe. They've made the changes there. We've seen them make the changes with the returning team. The offensive line has certainly had their changes throughout the right side of the offensive line for sure throughout the year, trying to figure it out. So it's not like they've been just doing things and saying, oh, it'll come along. No, they've been working on it and trying to get things better. And we've heard Macdonald say for the last few weeks that they've seen, incremental progress in the running game. It just hadn't actually broken out yet. And yesterday it did, to Tim's point, against a not great defensive front, but they were able to pop and have a big day on the ground, and that certainly shows that they can, adjust and make progress, and we'll see how things continue to move. I wouldn't necessarily say, like, if the running game sputters the rest of the year, it wouldn't shock me if they look to bring in a run game coordinator of some kind to diversify it at some point this offseason. I don't see them making any changes with the coaching staff at this point from what we've seen, but definitely a big stride forward for them yesterday.
What's easier to replace, players or coaches? That's what it boils down to. That's why you hear the outcry. That's why you get fans up in arms, because when you draft a player or you sign a player, you are, essentially locked into them for, most of the term of whatever that contract is, because you don't want to take the risk of the cap hit and the dead money and all those kind of things that are involved. But a coach, you can change coaches, you can shuffle coaches in and out however often you want. There's always that shiny toy that's sitting out there who's got some weird offensive system or some amazing defensive system that you're like, hey, I would like to have that for my team, or I'd like to have that guy coaching my team. That's why you get the constant chatter about, well, why don't we replace the coach? Why don't we replace the offensive coordinator? Why don't we replace the defensive coordinator when things aren't going well? Because that's the easiest thing to change. You can't overhaul 11 guys on offense with a snap of a finger, but you can change the guy who's running the offense.
Yeah, and there seems to be right. We made reference to it earlier. There's this all 22 now person, and it's so prevalent in the sport, and it's just I just had enough with it. I just had enough of it. I mean, and good for them and all that, but they're not. Most of these people are not qualified to sit there and give expert analysis on what the play was or what the play design is. They're not in the meeting rooms. They don't know it. They don't know. Most of them don't know what they're talking about.
You mean being a star high school running back didn't allow you the opportunity, or fullback didn't allow you the opportunity to go out and analyze tape and break it down and make overall rash judgments about the way a team is working?
Oh, I mean, it's if they were so good at it, they'd be working for an NFL team.
This is true.
You know what I mean? It's complicated, man.
It simultaneously made us smarter and dumber about football at the exact same time.
That's a great point.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. That's a great way to describe it.
It is. It has. You're right about it. It has made people smarter and dumber at the same time.
Because the thing is, like, there are some guys out there who do it. And I think former players and former NFL coaches who do it, like Brian Baldinger, Jeff Schwartz, like those guys who break down. They're Orlovsky. They're really damn good, and you actually learn shit when you sit down and watch them, whatever they're happening to post or whatever they're talking about. But yeah, dude who's in the press box or dude who's on his couch, like you can give your analysis of it, but don't tell me what the hell they're doing because you spent 17 hours breaking down the film. Like I'll go to the experts.
No fun. I don't want it. No fun. This defense you guys both touched on it, Curtis. I mean, the impact that Ernest Jones has made on this team, and I know there's other factors. Leonard Williams is playing great, but it's just, I mean, this will go down as one of the best in-season trades this organization has ever made. The way he's playing,
unquestionably, like he's been terrific for them. Now, I mean, I hope just about any linebacker that's played for the Seahawks is able to catch that ball that's thrown at him yesterday, because it was thrown directly to him. Like, so I'm glad he made that catch as opposed to the one he dropped in the Rams game. But ultimately he's just the decision that they've made to pivot from Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson to Tyrice Knight and Ernest Jones mid-season has been just a massive boon for that defense and what it's done. And I don't think we should downplay the play of Tyrice Knight either. I think he's been very solid in his role jumping into the lineup there too. But it certainly comes together once you have Ernest Jones there running things into the middle, and what he's been able to accomplish with them. He's you can definitely see why they want to get him signed for the future. I think he would love to stay here from what he's told us as well. And for them to go out potentially in successive years and find a star defensive lineman and Leonard Williams, trade for them, get him to stay, and trade for a star linebacker and Ernest Jones, trade for him, get him to stay. Those could be two very, very pivotal moves for the front office to hang their hat on here for a while moving forward.
Yeah. And then here I was thinking about this. Jim and I were talking earlier about it, Tim. I mean, it's just a rookie, and there's probably a whirlwind of things that are going on for rookies, and they have to get up to speed of the game. We just talked about this, right? The grace period of Grubb and just rookie quarterbacks and all that. But God, when I think back when I watched Tyrice Knight play yesterday, and I'm thinking all the plays he's making, tackles, led the team in tackles, I believe. There's a couple, one or two times he's guarding or covering Marvin Harrison and making plays, and I'm thinking, what the hell happened in training camp? Did they not was he not doing this in training camp?
Well, he was known coming out as a tackler. That was his calling card, was that he was a very fundamental, very strong tackler, run support, that kind of guy. The pass coverage thing was always going to be kind of his question mark. And I think that's what you saw early in the season, and maybe why they slow played him the way they did, was he needed to get better at the pass recognition, the pass coverage, the drops, all those kind of things that go into having to do that at the linebacker position for them. And I think it helps too to have, you're now pairing him with a guy that you feel incredibly solid with. It almost, it's not the same, but it was kind of like when Jordan Brooks got here and he was paired with Bobby, and you saw Brooks kind of take a little bit of time that first year to sort of grow into what he became. Knight kind of feels the same. You needed that solid guy in Ernest Jones in there that they could trust, that they felt good was going to be assignment sound, that was going to do everything that he's asked to do, to then feel comfortable putting Knight in there. And I don't know if they felt that way with where things were with Dotson and Baker, earlier in the season. I know Knight got thrown in there when Baker wasn't playing, but you needed that solid figure next to him to sort of maybe allow him to make some of those young mistakes that he was going to make just because he's a rookie and going through it for the first time. But what we've seen the last couple of weeks, he's picking it up pretty damn quick, and he played exceptionally well yesterday.
Yeah, and similarly, think back to Richard Sherman. He didn't start right away as a rookie.
Yeah,
neither him or Byron Maxwell we're ready to jump in it from game one of that season. But they got there, and I mean, Tim, you remember looking back on that training camp, neither one of them necessarily jumped off the field for us as rookies in training camp. It took them a little bit of time, and then they both became very good players. With Sherm obviously being much better, potential Hall of Famer down the line. But sometimes it does take a little bit to adjust as a rookie coming into the NFL and figuring things out. And he's a violent linebacker. He's willing to lay some hits out there too. But he's been fun to watch since he's jumped into the starting lineup again, for sure.
All right, boys. What do we think this week? You mentioned this before. Packers, you're going to get a very much different defense, right? That they're going to be facing on Sunday night. Van Ness, you got Clark and Gary, and these guys, Devon White. I mean, this is a better front. Good statistically, especially against the run, points given up to very good defense. What do you expect the atmosphere to be like? That's the other thing, too. What do you expect the atmosphere to be like on Sunday night against the Packers?
Yeah, it might be the best home game atmosphere we've had in a while. Like a late season in the mix, Sunday night Sunday night game against a good team. I expect that stadium to be pretty hyped on Sunday night.
A lot of Packer fans.
You could see some of that too, for sure. But I think it'll probably end up being a pretty relative low scoring kind of game, kind of a grinded out kind of affair. And Which team comes out, I don't know. I actually think the Seahawks probably have a better chance against Minnesota the following week, just because I think there's still some like paper tigerness to the Vikings with what they've done this year. But this is where you want to be a month ago. You've got everything in front of you. You've got the lead in the division. That we're heading towards a potential NFC West championship game week 18 with the Rams coming up. So
Could be awesome.
Yeah, it could be a really fun stretch of football to watch down here over the next 4 weeks.
Think about what the situation could be between Thursday night and Sunday night. So Thursday night you got Rams Niners. If the Niners, look like the Niners did yesterday, obviously against a crappy Bears team, but if the Niners look like they did yesterday and beat the Rams, you have the opportunity Sunday night to basically plant the flag in the division. Now, it obviously won't be wrapped up by that point, but you have that chance to get to 9-5. It should be a great atmosphere. It should be a fun game. There's going to be a shit ton of Packers fans. They come out of the woodwork. They're going to wear the cheese heads. It's going to pop on TV because they're going to be wearing yellow. It's like it's going to look terrible, but for what we've all talked about with like the Bills fans showing up earlier this year, but and this could be a playoff preview. Like as it stands right now, it could be Seattle, Green Bay on the wild card weekend, back here in Seattle. So very fast, very interesting matchup because as Curtis pointed out, it's a far better defense than what Seattle played, yesterday. I think the Packers offensively are really good. Like Jordan Love's really good. Josh Jacobs is really good. Those receivers are pretty damn good. And I also think Curtis is right that I think your better chance of these two games is probably Minnesota the following week. I still have zero belief in the Vikings, even despite the fact they have 11 wins. So, but Sunday night should be fun. It'll be a really fun atmosphere and a fun game to be at. And like all Packers Seahawks games in Seattle, something batshit crazy is going to happen in the north end zone, and we're all going to be scrambling to write about it at like
100%.
9:00 Sunday night.
Well, and a great chess match coming up in the next 2 weeks, right? Young defensive, quote, mastermind and Mike Macdonald against two very accomplished, head coaches who call plays.
Yep.
And two offenses that are rolling. All right, boys, that's it. Ground Puck Podcast with Curtis Crabtree of Fox 13, also Tim Booth of the Seattle Times. In case you miss it, find this podcast and the YouTube replay of it up on YouTube. Please subscribe there when you go there. Also, check it out, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. And, of course, always up at pucksports.com. All right, gentlemen, we'll talk to you next Monday. Thank you.
See you, Puck.
See you, Puck.
And, of course, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They got the best local craft beer in all of the Northwest. They are the beer of the Pacific Northwest. Makers of Manny's, Bodie, Lucille, Rogers, all of it. Host, of course, of your other favorite beers as well. And the tap room open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Visit them again online, georgetownbeer.com.